Hello and welcome to Center of Effort Estate Winery and our vineyard here. Today it's our pleasure to show the fans of the Petersen Museum a little bit different collection. It'll be done in 3 sections. One section will be the hypercars, the other will be the emotional part of the collection, and then we'll go up to the house and we'll see some of the classic cars that we have. There'll be a theme that you'll see in the collection. I think you'll figure it out pretty quick. I won't spoil the punchline here, but we just want to welcome you to our area, and we hope you enjoy the collection that we put together. Okay, here we have the F40, and right behind it the F50. I sometimes get asked about the collection, which car is the favorite, and I kind of use the description that the F40 is the most visceral car that I own, because when you get in it, there are really no safety features except ABS, the brakes. So you better know what you're doing when you get behind the wheel of this car, because it truly is a race car. From 1990, it has historic plates, which is kind of hard to believe when you look at this car, but just a fun car to drive because you are one with the road when you're in this car, and unbelievable power and response in it. Behind it is the F50. The F50, I was fortunate enough to purchase both cars from the Les Wexler collection. They have less than 500 miles on each of them, and they were for sale individually, and I was able to procure them as a pair, and really enjoy having these two in the collection. It really helped me when I put that together with the Enzo and the LaFerrari to have somewhat of the supercars of Ferrari together. The 288 I did not buy for the reason it reminded me too much of my 328, and I had one and just decided I didn't need another car that looked like it, even though performance was highly different between the two. Someday may add a 288, but right now having the 40, the 50, the Enzo, and the LaFerrari make a nice supercar collection of Ferraris. The F50 is more comfortable than the 40, also more comfortable than the Enzo for that matter. Enzo's more like the F40 to me, and the F50 is more like the LaFerrari. Very unusual car. I used to have it with the top off, and just in the last 6 months we put the top back on it, and I prefer the looks of it with the top on. It makes it look a little more aggressive than it does as a Cabriolet. I mentioned about ABS on the F40. And I have to tell an interesting story. I was fortunate enough, I took one of the Ferrari Corsa Pilota Trek schools up in Canada, and we were going through a braking exercise at 30, 50, 80, and 100 miles an hour. And I thought I was doing pretty good till the instructor got in the car with me at 80 and proceeded to tell me I didn't know how to brake. So we got out of the car, and he looked at me and he asked me if my feet were okay. And I thought that was a strange question since I'm in a driving school. And then he said, "Are your toenails okay?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "You have no problems with your feet?" I said, "No." Then he proceeded to take his foot and stomp on my foot and keep tremendous pressure on the top of it. I had no idea what was going on, and then he gradually released the pressure. And he says, "Now I want you to get in the car and brake like that at 80 miles an hour, and I'm going to be at the end of the course, and you're going to stop right before you get to me." I was a little scared, a little trepidation, but I got in the car and I stomped on that pedal like I'd never stomped before. And he never moved, and I stopped right in front of him, and it was probably the greatest braking lesson I've ever had, and something that stayed with me my whole life now. Here in the collection, we've got the 2005 GT40, and next to it is the Ford GT 2019. Part of it was fortunate enough to know Alan Mullally, who was the CEO of Ford at the time, and thought the GT would be a wonderful car. We ended up with serial number around 100, and just an unbelievable responsive car in the sense that on a straightaway, I don't know anything that keeps up with it. The Ferraris might be a little bit better on the corners, but just an unbelievable American engineered car that probably has the fastest first gear of anything that I own in the collection. When the new GT40 came out, put the name in for the list, and we were fortunate enough to get the 2019 and went through a little haggling to make sure we could get it painted in the Mark IV red, which is a Ford color, so both the GTs match. And recently in January, able to procure GT40 1965, serial number 1027. It was the filming car for the Grand Prix with James Garner in it, a very famous GT40. And so for us, that's being restored back east by Mark Allen or Rare Drive. And so we'll have 3 of the GT40s together in the collection, which kind of makes it unique and special in that regard. What's interesting about the LaFerrari is they asked us if you were buying the car to go to Italy so they could measure your backside to see how you fit in the driver's seat. This is an unusual car for them in the sense that the seat's bolted down and the pedals move towards you or away from you. And we were there with friends, and as I was getting measured, one of my friends looked at me and said, you know, if you sell this car, they got to find another ass just like you. And we all looked at her and thought it was a clever line. At least everybody else did. I'm still thinking about it. But it was one of the first times I've ever been measured for a car that I was buying. With the LaFerrari, I also wanted to mention this one's somewhat unusual in that it has a red top. Most of the Ferraris or LaFerraris you saw coming out of Ferrari, they would have the red or a black top, or they'd use a contrasting top. We were able to digitize this car at the factory, and I thought the red top made this car look more like a drop of water that was going through the wind, and more curvaceous, and it seemed to lower the car in its stance. And so I have one of the few ones with a solid red top matching the body. SA Aperta, 1 of 80 anniversary special. I was really fortunate to get on the list for this car. Amedeo Felisa he's now retired, but the CEO of Ferrari. They had gotten into an issue in their engine bay on one of their 400 series Ferraris where the heat shields had come off and one of the engines caught on fire. And we were fortunate enough to help them with the bonding routine so that the shields stayed on and protected the car. Of course, safety was returned. Never really quite an issue, but one that belt and suspenders were able to fix. It worked out in a way that we were in Pebble Beach and they had announced the Aperta, and I was fortunate enough to get on the list. And quite a car, $599 Berlinetta frame, but this is convertible. It comes with a cloth top. You'll notice this has a carbon fiber top. One of those things, we were visiting the factory and I said, you know, you really don't have a top if you go over 65 miles an hour. You have to take the cloth top off. And they informed me, well, we make a composite roof for the car. Only takes a couple hours to put in. You could do that. Fortunately, I was smart enough to have the top shipped to Ferrari in Newport Beach, and $5,000 later and 8 hours of installation time, I have one of the few carbon fiber roof Apertas around the world. So it makes it a hardtop, really changes the appearance. Great car. Not many miles on it. It's more of a collection piece because it's so special. Okay, this is the 27 TDF Ferrari. Another special car, 799 or 800 of them. And having a great relationship with Ferrari, I was able to secure this car. It's the last Ferrari with Amedeo Felice's fingerprints all over it. Dear friend, and I really appreciate the engineering in the car. First one Ferrari that has rear wheels that turn. And if you've ever ridden in a ski boat that has a center skeg in it, you realize how that holds its position in water. And this particular car, when you take a corner in it, you can take more G's than any other car that I've driven in this stable here. The 918 in the collection's kind of a little bit different in the sense that I was not buying the high-end Porsche cars. I'd had the 356 sunroof and Cabriolet, and then Indigo Motors called me up and said, why don't you buy a 918? And I wasn't really interested in the car. I wasn't quite sure. I really haven't driven the high-end Porsche cars. And after a bunch of debates back and forth, at the time Porsche also came out with a great idea that you'd get right of first refusal on new models if you bought the 918. So, short story, bought the 918, absolutely loved the car. In the electric mode, it's probably the fastest golf cart in the entire world, and in the hybrid mode, the performance is unbelievable. Great car. It's led to us getting the exclusive, the GT2 RS, the Speedster, 911R, and just great car, great engineering. And the fact that it's a hybrid, it's kind of a sign of things to come. Next to it is the Carrera GT. That car really lucked out after getting the 918, decided to add to the Porsche hybrid collection. And so I was given the opportunity to acquire a Carrera GT with 300 miles on it. Belonged to a collector in Japan. Very unusual car, guards red, and that and the 918 make up part of our collection. Still looking for a 959. Wonderful car, one of the first with ABS and all the latest electronics on it, but it's hard to find one that's really in good shape and is in guards red that'll match the collection. We have the 16.4 Veyron Bugatti. Really an unbelievable car. Being a mechanical engineer, I think this is one of the finest engineered cars of anything I own, from the way the two V8s are together for 16 cylinders, 4 cams, 1,020 horsepower. Just a totally responsive car. Very comfortable to sit in and to drive. Has a little bit different sound, more of a whine or a turbine sound to it than, say, the Enzo or some of the other cars. But just a pleasure to get in and take a drive here in the country where we live. And as I said, very well engineered, and a car you got to be careful with because it does have a lot of horsepower and can get up and move.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to click subscribe, comment, and like for more videos like this one.